Hi there, and welcome to the great mini rebuild. This is part 3. You recall at the end of episode or part 2, we just sent the shell off to a place called Minus Paint that does paint stripping and dipping to remove all rust. Well, as of when I started making this video anyway, that hasn't come back yet, so I've been busying myself with other things, bits and pieces, suspension components. I've stripped, put all new bearings, new bushers, painted them with a 2-pack epoxy paint. Hopefully that'll last pretty well. Pulled apart the windscreen wiper motor, which was seized, but now seems to work okay. So that was a bit of a challenge, but it's all come up pretty good in the end. Also pulled apart the brake booster, which is a genuine PBR, which the Cooper S's had. This was in pretty poor condition. In fact, someone pulled it apart previously and had put it back together wrongly. Anyway, I got a professional to fix that, so I sent it off to a guy in Queensland who kindly renovated it for me and sent it back in pristine condition. It looks excellent. So the next challenge was the gearbox. This is a 4 synchro, not an A+ gearbox, and it came to me like this. So just a housing, nothing in it. Is in pretty rough condition. As you can tell, I've been sitting around outside just like this. All the parts were in a big plastic bin, so I created a sort of an exploded view of how I thought it went back together and observed that there were actually probably 1.5 gearboxes of parts here, so that was a bit confusing. Also stripped down the diff, got it ready to put in new bearings and bushers and thrust bearings and that sort of stuff. This whole gearbox and all the parts in this engine are really filthy, very dirty and oily. So it obviously had some oil ring issues, I think. So on the last 42-degree day we had here in Adelaide, I spent 2 hours in a friend's tin shed where he has a water media blaster and got that onto this gearbox and cleaned it up. It's actually come up pretty well, and those things are vicious, but gee, hard work in 42 degrees, I can tell you. But that's worth it. This gearbox looks nice, and the water blasting process actually seals the surface, so it's a little more resilient to absorbing grease and crap like the original did. As you can see by the parts here, this is a remote change gearbox, but it had me a little bit confused at first because the output cover that you can see there, it was actually fitted with the bearing and the spigot for Magic Wand gear stick. But in the exploded parts, you'll see there's all the parts for the standard remote gear stick. So when I got this box of gearbox parts, it contained a whole bunch of mixed stuff, including 3 main shafts, 2 or 3 of second and third gears, and a third, stuff like that. So putting it together has been something of a challenge because there's so many odd parts. So I went on an ordering spree for the gearbox. Pretty much put all new synchros, all new bearings. The gears were all pretty good. All new seals. The 2 things that were both completely clapped out were the 2 selector rings. This is the one here you can see for the, I think it's first, second gear. That one wears pretty quickly on the Mini because it's a relatively short selector. However, my third and fourth gear selector, which is a bigger circle, was also very badly worn, probably because whoever's been driving it's been driving it with one hand pulling on the gear stick, which is pretty common, but it actually causes the selector fork to ride on one side, and you can really wear them prematurely if you do that. So don't drive around with your hand on the gear stick. The good news, today the guys from Minus Paint rang me up to say that the body had been stripped and derusted and she was all ready to pick up. So it was make the trip down to Wingfield, and at first look, shows a lot more panel damage than I thought. Anyway, onto the back of the trailer and off for the trip home. Once we got her home, it's off the trailer and into the garage, and then for an initial walk-around inspection. This is the other side. Same here. You can see it's obviously had wing mirrors or something fitted at some point, and God only knows what all the other holes are for, but they're all thing, but this one's got a bit of nose rust around there. I don't know what I'll do with that yet, but I'll probably just cut the guard off and get a new guard. Bit of rust on the scuttle on this side. Once again, it's possible that to be fixed, because most of it sounds all right, except for this very sort of narrow areas. So probably just fix those, save me a thing. I've got new A panels for here. This has obviously had a bit of a dent at some point. The sills actually look reasonably good until you get underneath and have a look, but not too bad. The back's obviously had a fair bit of work done on it by looking at all the grinding and cutting marks. And if you look inside, a lot of the seams have been brazed. So she's obviously had a fair bit of work. You can see the brazing over there as well. And I'm pretty sure that none of that stuff is original. Anyway, anywho, as they say, roof doesn't look too bad. Reasonably square, little hole up there, but I think that's where an antenna or something was. Other than that, yeah, keep me busy for another 6 months. So now that all the rust has been eaten out, I've been able to see that the boots are a lot worse than I originally thought. So I ordered a half boot repair panel before, which has already come in now, but having a good look at this, I think I'll just replace the whole boot with a whole new boot floor, which the boot floor comes from right at the back here, goes right up into this thing on the left here, which is called the heel board, and actually goes over the top of that and forms, I think it's the bottom of the rear seat, in fact. Pity, because it's got a brand new battery box, but probably better off to get a whole new boot rather than try and patch it some more. So we've got the old girl up on the rotisserie and flipped her over here. So now you can sort of see the state of the bottom. Most of the floor is actually very solid. It's not rusty or hasn't got any holes in it. That brown bit is an undercoat of some form and it's not rust. And I think I can beat most of the wrinkles and things out of it if I'm persistent. So I'm going to try doing that, get away with not replacing the whole floor because that's a big job. So I set about doing the hard part first, which I believe is the rear part. So here you can see I've removed the entire, or most of the boot floor, except for those edge bits. Spot welds drilling, there's thousands of spot welds in these cars. Drilling them out is a bastard of a job. You can see one small repair there I had to do on the edge of that back panel, but that's pretty much hidden, so I didn't mind one of my bodgy patch jobs fixing that bit. Yeah, so then, I mean, the other parts that are left to be done is this, the sills, obviously, the outer sills. The inner sills are mostly okay. There's a hole through that back quarter there, but the rest of the inner sills pretty much all right. The one or two minor spots of rust I'm just going to patch, but certainly that whole outer sill's got to come off and will be replaced. So the pile of rusty metal is getting bigger. I don't want to cut too much out of it until I get the boot floor in because it makes the whole thing a bit too floppy. I've got one or two braces in, but I want to put the boot floor back in and that before I start pulling the sills off and reducing the rigidity of the frame. So while I'm waiting for the replacement boot panel to arrive, I've started repairing a few of the small rusted holes around the body. I've cut off the piece of the outer sill that's around this rear corner. This is where the subframe bolts onto the heel board, and it's notorious for those bolts that support the subframe rusting in place, and then you break them off as you try to get them out. I broke one off when I removed my subframe, so I had to replace one of these. So what I've done is I've fabricated up two replacement brackets that hold the subframe mounting captive nuts. I've put a much more substantial nut base in, milled them up on the lathe and the mill and fix them in place, and we'll make sure they've got plenty of copper grease or something so they don't bloody rust. But they'll be a lot stronger than the originals were, and they're certainly a lot cheaper when you make them yourself.
Before I stripped it down, I also thought all these panels were pretty good, and I'd probably just do a little bit of patching on the bottom corners and edges. But this back left quarter panel, um, there proved to be a good inch of bog in here. This bit that rolls around the wheel arch, you can see in this photo, perhaps not as clearly as you can in life, but that's actually been pushed into the car by, I'd say it's close to 25 mil. So that 20 mil of bog in there to sort of fill out that back corner. But the panels actually should be straight all the way along through to the fender edge there. But mine's got this big groove or dint where I think what's happened is it's been in a collision on that back corner and it's pushed that in, and they probably couldn't stretch the wheel arch out to recover that, so they sort of welded it in where it was and then filled the gap with bog. Looking at it from the inside, you can see here where the wheel arch looks like, to me it looks like it's actually been pushed inwards, which is down in this picture because it's up on its side. You can see the ripples in the back panel here, and you can see the top where they've pushed the quarter panel in and welded it to the wheel arch. Not quite sure how I'm going to fix that yet, but I'm certainly not going to do it by bending in the rear quarter panel. If anything, I'll slot the wheel arch and put an extra, 20 mil piece in there just to get that back corner out in the right place. I also thought originally I could fix these front fenders. The holes on the top are not really a problem. They are easy to fix, and overall the fenders are pretty solid. But now that I've had a good look at it without the paint and bog, this one is not so good. It's got a whole bunch of rust holes around that nice curve above the headlight. That's very hard to get that exactly looking right if you fabricate a piece to go in there. And the other thing that doesn't show on this photo is that the whole bottom part of the headlight ring has been pushed into the fender, so it's not flat like it should be. So I've decided I'll just replace the whole fender. They're not actually that expensive. Which leads us on nicely to today. And today I got my new right-hand fender, which is nicely wrapped in bubble wrap there, and I got a replacement rear quarter panel, rear left-hand quarter panel. And then, surprise, surprise, my boot floor, complete with brand new battery box, arrived today. So I'm really looking forward to putting that back in the car and finishing it off. But today is close to 40 degrees in the shed, so there'll be no shed time for Steve today. Anyway, some of that will be in the next video. Thank you for watching. Bye.